Good afternoon. Today we are going to deal with Block 3 of MS10, that is Organization Design, Development and Change. In the first session we are going to deal with organization and work, and in the second session we are going to talk about analyzing work. We have with us an eminent psychologist, Professor Gopa Bharadwaj from Delhi University, who is going to discuss about organization and work in the first session. I welcome Professor Bharadwaj to start the session.
Thank you. Very good afternoon. Here we are going to talk about the organization, how do they relate to work and how the human being is integrated into work. You know, in the animal world, nobody works, everybody survives. It is only the mankind which has invented, refined and restructured work, now which has become very formalized in its meaning, and the basic purpose of survival is no more associated, rather it is an important and integral part of our existence. Now the basic purpose for understanding work is to be able to relate to this activity, because in the early Greek history we find that work was not supposed to be done by gentlemen, it was done by slaves, and work was something very unpleasant. No nobleman or woman will get involved in that. It's only through the Industrial Revolution and gradual changes in the needs of people who are working in formal organizations, working for money, working for survival, working to keep themselves happy and their families happy. So the modern avatar of work that you see today is very different when the work was taken as something compulsion, something that is imposed by others, and you work under somebody. So the basic purpose of work has really changed, and if you look the slide here, you find that first point that we discussed today is the work is basic to our social and personal identity, which means that we derive our own identity from the work that we do. If one is working as a manager, he dons that work identity and starts thinking that he or she is a manager basically, and then a family man. And then the personal identity also is very much dependent on your dignity, importance, your responsibility that are associated with your work. So the work has taken up a primary position in our lives, and we are not able to dissociate with work. That is why in today's world we see that the retirement problems, when there is no work, you are supposed to create some work. Without work there is a void, there is a vacuum. So work becomes very important for us and is an integral part of our own existence. Second point that you see is the work creates a sense of reality and human bonding. When we work, we create that sense of reality, that what is existing outside us and within us both. That reality is very important for not only ourselves but for the society. So the kind of work that we do defines our own existence vis-a-vis our society and our own personal self. If we are involved in something bad, that creates trauma, anxiety. If we are not able to cope with the work pressure, then we say that we have lost ourselves, we go into depression, we go into frustration. So the kind of identity and existence, both interrelated to our reality, is given by work, and the work that we do in the formal structure or informal, whether in home or at office, we are working with others. We are not only working with ourselves, but we are also working with others. So it gives that space of human bonding. That is very important for all of us to understand and relate to. Then there are different perspectives to work. See, work is of interest to managers who manage the work at the organizational formal structure, also at the informal, because these days work is just not restricted to organizational setup, but also taken up as an extension of the human being, human family, human society. So the interest of managers cannot just be restricted to work, but this extends to people who are social scientists, who look into your behavior, your performance as a member of the civil society, and also the economists who are looking at the overall status of the financial and material position. And that is why you see in today's world, yesterday only so much of interest was generated around our finance minister's speech. So there is a possibility of extension of all these activities in our own sphere and our own existence. Now we go to the second slide, which is talking about the relationship of productive activity. See, these days the housework is also a productive activity. So wherever you are working, there must be some end result, some kind of consequence of that work. And especially in the organization, without production, there is no meaning to that kind of involvement in the work. So the work must be, at the end of the day, relate to the production, productive activity that may be exhibited in various formats. And the other meaning that we derive for work is value addition to goods and services, conversion of the raw material into something useful, whether it is goods, whether it is tangible things, or services that you provide through IT, through telephone, through the network of communication, transportation. All such things are value addition. If the trains stand on the track, they are not going to add value to the society, to the human being. Then thirdly, that is discussed in detail, is that the meaning of work varies from person to person, culture to culture. The meaning that you give to work in India is different from the meaning that is given to work in US. So there is a cultural variation, there is an individual variation. The significance of work to a simple laborer on the street is for survival. But when you earn more than what you can spend, then the meaning of work extends to other spheres. And we have various, we will come to that little later, various social scientists, behavioral scientists giving that meaning to that work. Now, an analysis has told us that the people, they vary in interpreting the meaning of work for their own life. So there are A to F categories which are giving different meanings to different spheres, different contexts. The A kind, if you look at the monitor, the basic meaning that is derived is that the value is given to performance, work for the sake of work. Here there is no negative affect, and there is a kind of a attachment to one's own performance, and the happiness is derived from one's own performance. It is under no compulsion. The Be Kind is where the person attaches the emotional value, something that is very positive and very attractive to the person and adds to the identity. Here the work can be done in any context. It doesn't have to be one doesn't have to conduct it in the organization only. Anywhere, home, family, friends, even in the playground. So the positive personal affect is being associated, and it adds to the identity of the person. Like people play in their own homes, in their playgrounds. So there is a positive addition to one's own understanding of self and adding to the identity. The C type of thinking in meaning of work is that people have to work, and people are working for the sake of giving back to somebody else. The profit is accrued for others. It is given to others, and it doesn't matter in which setting you are doing. Like for example, if your maidservant works at home, that must be profitable to you and also to the person. So it doesn't matter. Whatever the setting may be, the value is to be added in terms of the profit. And then we have work which is directed by others, which is not under the control of the person, but it is designed, planned and executed at the direction of somebody else who is not you. So it is the part which is you have to follow certain rules, regulations and rules. So it is a compulsion for you to work. Say for example, if you are getting paid for some activity, you have to work. Then E type of persons take the work as something which is physically and mentally tiring, something that is to be avoided rather than accepted. So this is a point where we are getting some kind of negative feelings that under some kind of compulsion, some kind of helplessness, people have to be working, and people get fatigued by working, whether it is physical fatigue or mental fatigue. And then we have the F type where it is going as per the regulations and the time perspective. The people saying that I have to work from 9 to 5, there is no kind of relaxation in that. So the time periods become very important, and people go and join at a specified time and come back at a specified time. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Then we have to understand that while we are working in an organization, a formal place, how do we relate to that? Now, there are certain things which have to be understood by understanding the organization. Organizations are not simple structures, they are quite complex. So people have to work in tandem with each other, in concert with each other. That is, if you are working, then your work must be in line with the other person who is working in the same order. So some kind of continuity, collaboration, coordination is required in the organization. So that becomes a part of organizing. Then there is the situation where one person doesn't do the entire work, one does the part of the work. So there has to be division of work or division of labor between people. So those who are trained, those who have been qualified, they are given the kind of work that suits them. And the most important part here is that there is an organizational goal. So the personal goal must get associated with the organizational goal, and this is achieved only by coordinating your activities with the others and then understanding the others' contribution as well as yours. So the organizational goals are achieved not only by your activity but also that is in coordination with others' activities. And if we continue with this, is that we have to understand the organizational setup too, which includes the organizational charts, which tells you must have seen those charts, which tells you the hierarchy in the organization, the positions that are there, and who is responsible for whom, what kind of work one is supposed to do is indicated partially by the organizational chart. It also tells you about the division of work, that the staff and line, who are the staff people who have to take decisions, and who are the executors, the line workers. So division of work, who are at the lower level. If you have seen the organizational pyramid, you see the stretch of people at the base. Here the replaceability is very important. So the work continues as the organization becomes restrictive in its divisions, the higher is the responsibility. So at the lower level you have the notions of responsibility becoming diffused, and at the higher level it peaks up. Then the organizational chart also tells you the maintenance of relationship, because you don't go as an automaton, you don't go as a part of the machine. So you have to work in a pleasant way with your colleagues. So one really understands the human relations in a given context. Given context in the sense that it is artificially created, but it also teaches very important lessons of life, how we maintain our relationships and how we coordinate our own activities so that people are in the organizational context as a family. Family with a superordinate goal, superordinate kind of existence, and they understand their roles vis-a-vis the role of others. Now we come to different approaches to organizing and analyzing work. Here the first approach that you see is the ancient approach. You see the Chinese built the walls, they had quite technologically sophisticated buildings. They also built roads, so did the Greeks. Now in the ancient approach, the division was in only two parts. One, that who own, and the other who work, the laborers. So the ancient approach had no dignity actually for the work. It was only collecting the requisite materials, telling people how to do it and forcing them to do it. And in the Greek civilization you see there is no dignity that is accorded to the labor. Only the nobleman directs and the labor work. But in this period also we find there is some kind of planning. The right kind of material is collected at the right place, right kind of power is generated. So the work that you see, whether it is pyramids or the Great Wall, you will always find some water, some kind of power source which was nearby, and one could work and proceed. So there was a planning, but at a very primitive state. And in this we have later on the Protestant ethics coming up, which was also associated with the Industrial Revolution, but the Martin Luther King, he brought the notion of giving dignity to labor, that work is very important, work is like worship. So just making people, forcing people to do as they are ordered to do, which was there in the ancient times, was not the main forte, but slowly it graduated, especially with the technological inventions of, say, the clock or the printing press, which was the invention of Chinese, and the clock in the West, in Germany. We have some kind of measuring and giving significance to work and putting it to some order. Second understanding, second approach emanates from Industrial Revolution, which is known for the mechanical inventions that were there, and especially these mechanical inventions in the field of agriculture and textiles. The spinning wheel, the invention of certain tools which were helpful in sowing and reaping, all such things, they revolutionized because there was a reason that work was not performed by human beings alone. The facilitator had come in terms of the machine. The Industrial Revolution brought in the machines which was helpful in designing and implementing certain order in the work. So people came to know that how do we irrigate. The ancient Egyptians also knew a lot about irrigation, and they had planned those dams. But the knowledge that they had is now only exhibited in the modern time. But the formal organization of work in terms of creating the machines, inventing the machines which would not only hasten the speed of work but also help the worker to work in a more positive manner and more helpful manner. It helped in designing new work methods, and we have one name very famous, Adam Smith. This happened at a time when the sea routes were discovered and mechanization has come. Adam Smith, basically an engineer, he said that the total work should not be done by one person, but it has to be divided into small units. And here we have the genesis of division of labor, and this division of labor was not in vacuum, but it was done to develop the task specific skills. If the work is divided into different tasks, the person should have the task specific skills, and as a consequence a lot of time is saved, and if you save time, that adds to your productivity. So the use of specialized tools for saving time, for developing skills were all very important at this stage. Another theoretical perspective we get from Ed Whitney, who found that his approach was to look at the machines. How do they relate to the man? Now, problem was faced if one machine was out of order, the whole work suffered. So what he did was he again revolutionized. He started using the interchangeable parts to create a new machine. So if one machine goes out of order, then there are other machines which have interchangeable parts and which can be put into work. So Ed Whitney brought a revolution again in terms of handling of the machine. Then we have Charles Babbage, who again put in specialized tasks, and here we have the beginning of the factory that we see. See, the work in the ancient time was, say, done on roads. which didn't need any sheds. The work, the material, raw material and labor and the directions were there, that's all. But when he had the power, the raw materials, the tools, they needed to be put under one roof. So we have the factory shed. The beginning of the modern factories that you say is actually put in practice first by Babbage. And here what he did was that skill specialization for specialized jobs. If one is doing something which is related to engineering, he does that. If one is doing a simple mechanical job, he does that. If one is mixing the raw materials, he does that. He doesn't need any specialized skills, but the order is already planned. And then we have the Owen, Robert Owen coming up. He brought the attention to the person who is at the base of the work, the labor, the employee. So his emphasis was more on improving the work life of the worker who are there in the factories, their living conditions. Then another important contribution of Owen was to bring to the fact that no unnecessarily created movement should be there, and the person should not be made compulsorily to work for long stretches of time. This was the focus, where he said that the person, if he or she is fatigued, will be putting in less effort, so the work will suffer. And one needs to pay attention to the causes of fatigue that are prominent, that are present in the work context, and reduce them, and in that process help in improving the overall work conditions. Now we come to an era which actually brought in the best part of human effort in making the work more scientifically approached and not just planned in a very, very loose manner. We have associated with scientific management is the name of Frederick Taylor, who revolutionized people's approach towards working. He worked in steel factories. He was basically again an engineer. He worked in steel factories, railway yards. What he did was to observe people doing their job and also identify what can be done to speed up the work so that more productivity takes place. So at the end of the day, one is making more products, enhancing the efficiency and helping the organization grow. There we have the concept of work design, not the format that you see today, but he developed. He experimented, Taylor experimented a lot on people who are capable of doing what kind of work. And he prompted, this was done in UK, he motivated one Irish worker to help him see the results of his experiment. He designed shovels. Taylor designed shovels, and the short-hand shovels, the long-hand shovels, large shovels, heavy shovels, like that. And he tried to know which kind of shovel is useful for which kind of material. Say from the rice grains to the steel. He designed the different shovels and found out which kind of tool helps in promoting the work activity and which would also help in measuring how much output the person was able to put in, and to sum it, he was contributing towards production control. In that process, he changed the face of industry, the nature of industry, what he did was he replaced the rule of thumb. Basically, people worked on their native knowledge, what they have been doing for long periods of time. What he did that instead of rule of thumb, he said that we need to look at the processes more scientifically, meaning that we must be having the ability to repeat the process, just not do it once. And he said that the process is not enough, we need proper people, right kind of personnel for right kind of job. So we must select the person who is most suitable, train that person and develop that person. So it's just not that anybody and everybody can come and work. One needs to know who is best suited. If it is physical kind of work, then a person having a lot of physical strength and the proper right kind of body should be selected. So scientific methods of selection was one of his greatest contribution towards industrial world. And not only that, he realized that people do not work alone or in a vacuum. So there is a need for coordination, cooperation, collaboration. The spirit of work must be taken care of, and one very important thing that he proposed was the equal division of work between workers, laborers and managers. Earlier, managers said that they are most important because they manage the work. Workers just do it mechanically. But here Taylor said that if you are dividing, give equal significance, give equal space and importance to both those who do execute the work and those who plan the work. So the importance of the worker is experienced by that worker. It's just not that an automaton is doing the work and is at the beck and call of his manager. Manager also realizes his or her own responsibility towards the work and the worker and doesn't take the major share of the fruits of work. So a kind of equality, how much you work, you are important accordingly. Now we go into certain assumptions of scientific management. One thing Taylor proposed was that the line of authority should be very clear. Who is doing what and who is answerable to whom? This kind of delineation of the roles in terms of authority must be clear. So one must immediately know if something goes wrong, who is responsible, who is to be contacted, right? So another important thing is separating the planning from action. Those who plan are not in the action. There are some other people who are doing the action. So planners are different. Here we get the age-old division of staff and line. The planning is done by one quarter, keeping in the needs of the workplace, worker, their skills, abilities, materials available. So all these planning, which is a very complicated aspect, is done by the manager, and the action is taken by those whom they manage.
So you mean to say that planners belong to the line staff or in the
Planners are the staff.
staff? Okay, and
The action is done by the line worker.
Okay.
So even the line managers and the staff, they are to be different. They are not the same. So there is a separation of this, because if you plan, then this is complicated, and if you are just given to act as per your plan, then you have the double responsibility and then your efficiency may get down. So planning is different from action. And one more thing, that human beings are rational beings, so they need to know why they are working. And this why is taken care of by promoting the incentives that are given to the workers. Workers must be motivated, proper incentives. So the kind of work that you do should not be just generalized. You must be paid as per your own efforts, your own contributions, and you should be further motivated. If you work more, then there is more reward for that. And the management and the workers are divided, that managers devise the method, workers work on it. So the planning and organizing becomes the context of management. So they plan, they organize. They are more into direction. And the science of management starts here with Taylor, where he has shown the way that the methods of executions are planned, but the actual execution takes place by the employees, by the subordinates. So it's the responsibility of the manager to plan his work in a neat fashion, without any ambiguity, with clear directions, clear roles, with enough flexibility, and that kind of training is to be given as well as partaken by the management in tandem with the workers. So there is a joint collaboration by managers as well as workers. And as far as the workers are concerned, Taylor proposes that maximize work by hiring right people. Train them, motivate them. This is the key to efficient work. And one more important thing is that look for work pacing, the speed of work. It varies from person to person. So you have to have a standard pace of work. This is a part of planning the methods. So the understanding the work pacing is to develop a natural rhythm and momentum, which is acceptable for the whole lot of workers, not for any specific worker. Now here it's very important, because we have to understand that people have different capacities, but there is an optimum capacity with which one can work, all can work. Those who cannot must not be a part of the team. So if one is, say, is not able to cope, he or she must be given proper training, and if not, then some diversification is required so that the person is put in different kind of job. So diversity management, though not in these specific terms, was brought in by Taylor. We many a time denounce Taylor for his non-human approach, but he was the person who was really a pathbreaker in identifying the human capabilities, competences and skills, and then provide the right kind of guideline. Now we come to the principles of scientific management. You see, one thing I have told you, that Taylor replaced the rule of thumb. What he did not denounce or ignore the traditional knowledge. Rather, he classified that knowledge. Whatever was there, he did not devise it on his own. Whatever knowledge was at the ground level, the ground rule of thumb, he classified that, then helped in tabulating and then converting the knowledge to rules. This is scientific management. Here the knowledge is there in a rather spread out way, not in a proper organized way. Taylor reduced that knowledge to rules. He brought out the laws of functions, laws of working, and formula for one best way to work. This is very important because the best way, one best way to work must be acceptable to all the workers who are there in the organization. It is not catering to any individual specific competence or skills, but since the work is to be done by an entire team, by all, so one needs to look at the average capacity. So transferring the classical knowledge, the already existing knowledge to something which is scientific, which can be tabulated, which can be put into order and put into place. Then another principle is planning out. This is the job of the manager, planning out the work in smallest detail. That is, plan ahead, at least one day ahead of what is to be done, so that people know what comes next. The smallest detail needs to be worked out. Nothing can be left to chance. So everything must be put into black and white and made available to people. And the principle for which he is criticized is the last one, where he says that no mental contribution from the worker is required. The worker is not supposed to think, rather work. And that thinking has already been done by the manager. So worker, what he believed in those times was that if the person is thinking, then his physical capacity is going to be affected. So all the thinking has to be left to the management and the worker has to execute the action. So here we get some glimpse of his classical thinking of taking the worker as not as intelligent or not supposed to use his or her intelligence while working. So a kind of a dehumanization part has come in. Then we come to constraints. What makes the scientific management, though this, let me tell you, these principles and practices of scientific management was applied for very many years and very successfully. The organizations could cope. Even in US, in UK, we have the Rolls-Royce, we have the Boeing, we have Ford, who followed Taylor and scientific management. But there are times in today's world this has lost much of its relevance, because Taylor's scientific management was very useful for simple jobs, simply designed jobs which were going to be in practice for a long period of time, and the product was similar. So if you produced a kind of a shoe, it is going to be there for a long period of time. And in these days of information technology and fast changing needs of people, the complexities have been brought in, and people mental abilities are required to be put in. A worker needs to be intelligent and put his or her intelligence into work. That is the given requirement of the modern times, and the products and services are changing very fast. So we need to look into those complexities, but simply adhering to certain rules and laws is not sufficient. So we need to cope with the fast changes. Taylor's scientific management was not geared for adapting to the fast rate of change.
Yeah, we'll stop here. We'll continue in the next session. So we continue with the same topic at 2:30. We'll meet again. Thank you.